But first, I have the honor of introducing our keynote speaker. In recent years, behavioral economics has been used to create a wide range of innovative public policies, such as secure choice. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from one of the foremost experts in this field, Dr. Richard Thaler. He's a professor of behavioral science and economics at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business. Dr. Thaler is known as a pioneer in the field of behavioral economics, having co-authored the best-selling book, Nudge, in which these concepts are used to tackle many of society's major problems, including the retirement savings crisis. We are fortunate to have him here today speaking about the key considerations for a retirement savings program like Secure Choice. Dr. Thaler, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Oh, I already forgot my clicker. They don't call us absent-minded professors for no reason. So thanks, Michael and Daniel. Finally get to meet Daniel, who's been harassing me by email for several years. Actually, the last state senator that did that got to the White House, so, you know. I'm going to talk a bit about this sort of from the 30,000-foot level and leave the mucky details to people who actually know something about them. There are, I don't need to tell you, 3 large crises in Illinois. Yeah, if I were you guys, that's what I would do. There are 3 crises. One that we're not here to talk about today, thankfully, is the state of underfunded state pension plans, public pension plans. The second is for people who have retirement saving plans at their work. Many aren't using them as well as they might. And then the third, which is what this plan is meant to talk about, is what about the people who don't even have a workplace plan? What hope is there for them? So, yeah, that's the plan for the day. Actually, I'm going to come over here because I can't see this either. No, you're not blocking me. So why don't people save for retirement? Of course, some people are just too poor to save. They're running a negative surplus on their daily accounts. There's nothing left at the end of the week or the month, and it's not surprising that they're not saving. But even those who could afford to save can find it difficult. So this is kind of what behavioral economics is about. And so what do we behavioral economists have to say about this problem? In order to answer that, let me say a bit about what this weird field of behavioral economics is. Here's a definition that was written by University of Chicago PhD, Herb Simon, who's kind of a predecessor of behavioral economics. And he uses a $20 word in this passage, pleonasm. You get 10 bonus points if you know what that word means. It's a redundant phrase. And so he asks, why do we need a word or a phrase, behavioral economics? Optimizing. So in any domain of life, when you go to the grocery store, when you choose a spouse, when you choose a career, when you decide what book to read, economic theory says in every one of those situations, you pick the best possible one given your budget constraint. Now, is that accurate? Well, essentially, economics assumes that everyone in the world is like this character, Mr. Spock from Star Trek, who you'll remember was half human, half Vulcan, and was perfectly rational and unemotional. And so in a world consisting only of Spocks, economics would work perfectly. Unfortunately, we've also got this guy. That's actually the best thing in the talk, so I'm going to let that linger. Most of us are a mixture of these two, and there's a bit more Homer Simpson in us than we might like. So what are we going to do when we have a world that consists of people with some of each of those characteristics? So how do they differ? I call the Spock-like creatures econs, because those are the people that populate economics textbooks and journal articles, and I contrast them with humans. So, humans find stuff hard. If you think about the math problem that underlies figuring out how much to save for retirement, that's a really hard problem. I don't know of a single economics professor who thinks he or she has solved that problem. I don't mean to say that they're going to be destitute. What I mean is, I don't know anybody who's sat down with a spreadsheet and so that's the first problem, is that just figuring out what to do is really hard, even hard for a professional. The second is that we all suffer from self-control problems, some weakness of will. That's part of what makes us human. Going back to Adam and Eve, we eat too many apples. We exercise too little. We eat more stuff worse than apples. And we all are tempted to buy something now rather than put stuff aside for later. So how can we help? Well, one approach is, we should just teach people to be more financially literate. And there's certainly a very good case for doing that. Financial literacy is hopeless. If we take a test of the US population on their financial literacy, even in the current grade inflation world, people get an F, not even a gentleman's D. They don't know the difference between a stock and a bond. They don't know that a mutual fund that has lots of different stocks is safer than a single security. They don't know anything. Okay, so getting them from nowhere to somewhere would be a really good idea. Personally, I think including this in high school curricula is a no-brainer. I always say that compound interest is at least as important in life as learning trigonometry. Didn't you used to be a math teacher? I mean, would you agree with that? Or do you use...
I have certain residual loyalties, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm sure cosines come up in everyday speech. So yeah, I think that there's a compelling case that we should do more of that. However, it doesn't work. There's just no evidence that these programs help. And part of the reason is that there's a long lag between when they're getting this education and when they have to do stuff. So I'm going to show you a picture. It looks a little messy, but let me just tell you what it is. This is a plot of the effect of various financial education programs. And as we go out 24 months from when they were, when the recipient got the information, we get the effect sizes, and you can see they're all slowly slipping down to zero. So what does this tell me? It tells me that, let me see. Well, I left something out. It was in the headline. My takeaway from this is, if we're going to do stuff on financial literacy, it should be on a just-in-time basis. And that's in any domain. So in this domain, part of the rollout should be preparing material for the people, both the employers and the employees, but especially the employees, about how to think about this. And they should be getting that in the weeks before they're going to get some material about the program. And that's the time to do it. We should be doing the same for people applying for mortgages. And there was one quite effective program on reverse mortgages that showed that if you gave people counseling right before they did it, they made much better decisions. So yes, education, but just-in-time education. Okay, so what else can we do? Some of you may know that it's been a long time now. Since David Cameron was elected Prime Minister, I've been working with the UK government in something they call their Behavioral Insight Team, though it's known to everyone as the Nudge Unit. And so especially in the first few years, I spent a lot of time going around to various ministers and agency heads saying, what's your problem? How can we help? And I found myself saying one thing over and over again, and it became known as the team mantra, which is, if you want to help people do something, make it easy. You can sing it to the Eagles song if you want. It sounds glib and banal, but it's essential. One thing I learned very early is, if you want to get people to do something, you remove the barriers that are preventing them from doing it. So, Cass Sunstein and I coined this term nudge, which is what you do to help people. I've recently coined a new term, sludge. Sludge is the stuff that's preventing you from doing it. And as somebody was saying earlier, if there's a whole lot of forms that everybody has to fill out, that's the sludge. So this program's the nudge, and part of the design should be getting rid of the sludge. Now, for retirement saving, we know, and this has already been said, but it's worth repeating, the only way people save is at workplace saving. It used to be there were two ways. The other way was paying off your mortgage. Then that got out of fashion. In my parents' generation, the first thing people did was pay off their mortgage. Now you refinance and take more money out. In 1980, people in their early 60s had no mortgage debt. That's not true anymore. So if we had another program, we could refinance people into 15-year mortgages if they're over 40. But that's for another day. So workplace saving is the only game in town. We know there are 2.5 million people in Illinois who are working at a place where they don't have this available, and it's the only game in town. So this is aimed at helping them with that. So how do we make it easy? Well, I already mentioned this, let's remove the sludge for the employers. And in the design phase over the next year, that's going to be really important. If employers are getting 100 pages of forms they have to fill out, there's going to be a revolt, and the bill may not be alive to see the launch. So that's step one. We know, why don't these companies start a 401k plan? It's because it's a pain in the neck. And every employer will tell you that. Furthermore, there's a fiduciary responsibility for designing the plan. So it's hard and costly, and that scares a lot of small firms. So this plan is meant to make it easy for the small employer, the guy who owns a restaurant or a repair shop or what have you. If he's got 25 employees, make it easy. Okay. This has already been mentioned by somebody, but the payroll service companies are going to be key to this. And we've got to get them involved and have them as partners. Almost everybody, even the tiniest firm, is using somebody to handle their payroll. Those guys, it's a few lines of code to add a new deduction. But you got to get them working with you, not against you. What about the workers? Well, the bill contains the most important thing, which is automatic enrollment. We know this works. Typically, we see something like 10% opt-out rates. Now, there's no guarantee we'll get that, but the UK has recently launched a national version of this, and that's about the opt-out rate we're seeing is 10%. And I'm pretty sure it's an 8% initial saving rate. Here's just one chart. This is the effect of automatic enrollment in plans administered by Vanguard. Now, this isn't a controlled experiment, right? These are different companies, but it just shows that any company that has adopted automatic enrollment is getting 90% enrollment across those bars are income groups. I have another picture for age groups, and it looks just the same. So, okay, step one we've got nailed. And now I'm probably getting ahead of myself since I'm talking about the next bill. 3% is too little. What can we do about that? A program a former student of mine, Shlomo Ben-Artzi, and I devised is meant to solve this. We call it Save More Tomorrow. And the idea is we all have more self-control in the future. Many of us are planning diets, say, in June. Certainly not today at lunch. So the way we created our program was we told people they could sign up to increase their saving rates later, like in a couple months. And in the ideal world, in our model, they do that when they're going to get their next raise. And that way they never see their paycheck go down. So, and you can do this like 1% a year, and pretty soon people are saving pretty good amounts. In the first company where we got to try this, which is actually a Chicago company, we tripled saving rates in 3 years. So this works. the large employers now are starting to get this. More than half of the large employers in the country are using both automatic enrollment and some kind of automatic escalation, like Save More Tomorrow. So that's a great start. Oops, I guess that's it. So we're making some progress in the large employer space. This is a great first step for small employers. I was bemoaning this to somebody earlier, I'll just end with this, that this is an idea that has been floating around Washington forever. And, well, you all know as well as I the current state of affairs in Congress. There's no reason that I can think of that Republicans should be opposed to this kind of action. After all, President George W. Bush tried to launch a partial privatization of Social Security with some of these aims. And, well, we won't go down that path. I'm happy that the state of Illinois is stepping up to the plate. I wish that we didn't have to do this 50 times. But until something happens in Washington, we're going to have to do it state by state. So let me end on that and take whatever questions you have.
Wait for a mic if you could.
I got a question.
Yeah.
About nudging behavior. We're happy to take the lead in Illinois, but we'd be happy to see this be a national thing. How do you nudge congressmen to change their behavior?
Yeah, you know, that's above my pay grade. I mean, I will say, we were talking about this before, in 2006, which seems like eons ago, the Pension Protection Act was passed. It's a gigantic bill. There's a couple paragraphs about DC plans in there. And I can tell you how those paragraphs got in there. I was testifying at the Joint Economic Committee, which was then chaired by Senator Bob Bennett from Utah. And I gave him a spiel kind of like this. And he said, that's great. How can we help? And I said, get out of the way. Make it easy. And then we went off and had lunch. I think Bob Posen, who's now the CEO of one of the Boston mutual fund companies, not Fidelity, but anyway, it doesn't matter. So what ended up happening, in the bill, there was a nudge to employers. If you have a plan that has automatic enrollment and automatic escalation and a match, then you get a waiver from the non-discrimination rules. That helped a lot, you know? So it was only 10 years ago that was a bipartisan bill. We don't have those anymore. I think, well, who knows what's going to happen after this next election, but I think it could be possible. Yeah, this was who I was having the conversation with.
And a shout out to Dr.
People would wait until they get mics, that would be great, because we're recording.
Well, as I shared with you earlier, Doctor, as the only Republican who often attends these meetings, I don't understand why more Republicans don't get this, but there are a few of us at least try.
Yes, and I appreciate it.
Yeah. I'm fascinated with the whole behavioral economics. The one word that I know the financial industry is particularly concerned about as we look at how these plans might come together is that word leakage. When people put the money in, and perhaps many for the first time in their life, they start to see, hey, now I have enough money to buy the big TV or buy the car. Have you done any work yet in that area or any advice to offer?
Well, this is a big problem. We've made some progress on it in 401k land. So there's a law that says, it used to be a much worse problem. There was a law passed that said if you have more than X dollars, I think it may be 5,000, then the default option the employer has to give you is to roll it over. And that, make it easy. I only have one answer to all problems. So if the default is to roll it over into the new plan where you're working or into an IRA, then not surprisingly, more people do it. So one thing that the board should be thinking about is how to make that easy. Yes, you have portability, but will people use it? And what will the employer do? And early on, these accounts are going to be really small. And, somebody's got $400. It's going to be tempting to use it to do something fun. But again, if the default is to just leave it there, and if that's possible, I don't even know whether that's possible in the bill. And if it isn't, we should make it that it is. So you could just leave it there. And so that's the best thing you could do. Why does automatic enrollment and Save More Tomorrow work? Because of inertia. So we took inertia. That's the problem that you have to overcome to get people to enroll. But what we try to do is make use of that. So we know that people are inert, so let's make the doing nothing thing good.
But that default that you're speaking of would really only apply at times when someone changes jobs or whatever, when the portability comes in.
That's the biggest source of leakage. Borrowing, there's a lot of talk about borrowing. It's a problem, but most of it gets paid back. I'm less worried about that. And it's not, if you made it impossible to borrow, then I think people would be more reluctant to put the money in. So sure, we lose some money that way, but I think the quitting jobs leakage is a bigger worry to me than the loans. Yeah, we have a question here.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up to that question, I think that record keeping should be able to solve for a lot of that. Typically, when you leave an employer and you are rolling over, you're going to an entirely different company, but these accounts are all going to stay on the same platform. So it should be able to be solved between record keeping and payroll companies, how to make sure that that account doesn't end up getting cashed out.
Yeah, well, as we all know, that's easier to say than to do.
As a record keeper, I can assure you it's something
okay, but what happens if somebody leaves and they go to work for a company that offers a 401k plan? So,
the idea, too, is that people would be able to continue to contribute. I mean, that's the goal, is that then you end up with 2 is better than 1, right?
Yeah.
So have an IRA and have your 401k.
So all I'm saying is board members and record keepers all should be listening to this, and these are the little details that are going to determine whether this is works or not. Like everyone else, I'm worried about the system crashing on day one, but I'm more worried about getting the overall design right. And this is a really important detail. So if the default is when you leave your job, nothing happens, that's great.
Yeah, as someone who's working both in policy and product design, my best question is, the question I'm struggling with right now is, the default is becoming 3%. Like the state bills are all now 3%. The products that we're developing, I'm getting a tremendous amount of pressure from forces to have it 3%. And I guess my question then is, what is your best advice to get that number higher? Is there what data, third-party research?
So let me tell you a little story as to how that happened. Back during the Clinton administration, when automatic enrollment was just a new idea, and we were going around trying to convince employers to try it, many said, oh, I don't know whether that's legal, because we're taking some action without the explicit consent of the employee. So I had a friend who was working in the Treasury Department, a guy called Mark Avery, who's back in the Treasury Department, knows more about pensions than any living person. And I called Mark and said, could you help on this? And he said, yeah, I could help. And he wrote what's called an advisory letter, basically said, yeah, it's okay to do this. But the form of those letters is to give an example. So there was an example. Enroll people at a saving rate of 3%, blah, blah, blah. The rest is history. No one, including Mark, ever thought that was the right number. But you're absolutely right that it sticks. Last year sometime I gave a talk to all the retirement clients of PIMCO. So 500 large firms sitting in a big room. And I took a poll. How many of you use automatic enrollment? About 75%. How many of you start at 3%? Almost all. And the talk I give when I talk to employers is, if your employees aren't saving enough, it's your fault, because we know how to fix it. There's no reason why it should be 3%. Any employer can make it whatever they want. And why not 6? So, I'm guessing the reason for 3% here was it was the biggest number that the wise people in charge thought could pass the legislature. But that's why the next step has to be automatic escalation. But all of you who are in this business more generally, there's just no reason why firms shouldn't be switching to 6%. And by the way, the other thing firms should be doing, as long as I'm on that rant, is automatically enrolling everybody in the firm. So the firms that use automatic enrollment, it only affects new employees. But it's easy, you make a few changes in the plan, just change if there's a default, just change it. And it's, well, actually then we're gonna have to re-enroll everybody, and we'll re-enroll them, and we'll make it 6%, and we'll have automatic enrollment, and we're done.
I have one more question.
Yeah?
Yes. I understand that 3%. I understand 3% is really too low a rate, but especially for a program like the one we're trying to construct, where you're targeting people who are earning a hell of a lot less than most middle income, is there any study that says if you go to 6%, that the opt-out is going to be much greater initially, because the sacrifice on the part of these people is going to be greater? I would imagine that an escalation over a certain period of time would probably make it more palatable or easier to...
Yeah, I agree. And I don't know the answer to that offhand, but I can tell you the best place to find out would be look in the UK. So I know we've got 10% opt-out nationwide, and some of those are low-paid workers. And if you want a contact over there, just get in touch with me and I can make that happen. Department of Work and Pensions. Anything else?
You've had your, one more quick question, and then we'll wrap up this section.
Thanks, Ida. I was struck by your comments about just-in-time education and the results from the reverse mortgage education or counseling. So what are your recommendations for marrying the just-in-time education with this well-structured retirement program here?
Well, I think I don't have a glib answer to that. We certainly need a way of reaching out. But, you know, given that we have automatic enrollment, I don't think that we have to do too much at the employee side unless we want people to actively pick a higher number. We should have a longer conversation about that because that could backfire. Not because the rate's too high, but just by drawing attention to the fact that we're doing this. So, that could go either way. Ideally, we'd have automatic escalation somewhere. Maybe the education should be at the employer level. And everybody else in the room knows more about this than me, but it could be that an employer could have an option to offer automatic escalation, and the payroll administrator could administer it. I don't know, but you know, I think the education we need mostly is something good is happening. And the state has set up a way for you to very easily start saving for retirement. And also give people a lag. So they know it's going to happen. And again, the ideal thing would be to have it happen at a time when people are already getting raises, if that's possible, but that's probably not possible. Okay, I think I've taken up more than my share of the time. Thanks.
Never. We're going to take a short break, but before we do, I want to thank the professor, the treasurer, and the senator for kicking us off this morning with some framing, some what's at stake, and also to your point, I do know that we did a session like this in California with their board last year. One of the researchers was there from the Boston Center on Retirement Research. Jeremy, who was the name?
James Choi.
James Choi. So really,
no, Jeff Sossenbacher.
Jeff Sossenbacher. So some really interesting look at the drop-off of who was opting out when they changed the rate between 3% and 6%. Very little drop-off between 3% and 6%. Much higher, it started around 10%. People started to opt out. So we'll actually be compressing a lot of the insights from a series of these state dialogues we'll be having, and we'll share that information. It was great. So thanks very much, everybody. We'll take a short break, 5 minutes or so, get to know your neighbors, grab some coffee, and we'll reconvene for the panel. Thank you.